Good evening. Your Excellencies, Your Excellency Dr. Mohammed Sada, President of the Community College of Qatar, Dr. Mohammed Naimi, Ms. Leonie Ruth Lethbridge, the CEO and Executive General Manager of the Commercial Bank of Qatar, distinguished guests, guest speaker, Mr. Will Wilson, honored guests and colleagues. On behalf of Georgetown University in Qatar, I welcome you to tonight's launch of the new collaborative cybersecurity research group. We are truly delighted to establish a working relationship with the Community College of Qatar in pursuing research on this vital topic. Although long a concern, cybersecurity really came to the forefront for Qatar in 2017, when a cyber attack on official news agencies in Doha were used as a pretext to launch the blockade of the country. Last spring, we had the pleasure of hosting the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani. At that talk, His Excellency confirmed that what began with the cyber attack became a turning point for regional and international politics. This highlights both the importance of cybersecurity for the overall security of a nation and the unique challenges and opportunities presented, in particular for a small state. His Excellency highlighted that what helped the country pull through this difficult time was a team-based approach to developing solutions led by the Emir and the united front presented by both the citizens and the expatriate residents of Qatar. The Cybersecurity Research Group is working with a similar ethos, uniting two institutions, one with the expertise on geopolitics and the other with technical expertise in cybersecurity, with the aim of making a significant impact on the understanding of the particular cyber risks and security issues pertinent to Qatar and the region. It can be said that cybersecurity is the defining issue of our time, both domestically and globally. We at Georgetown and Qatar believe that research is at the heart of sustainable solutions to the challenges of the present and the future. And we are happy to be able to contribute to this collaborative effort with our colleagues at the Community College of Qatar to meet the needs of Qatar and its people and beyond. So, in conclusion, I would like to thank our partners in the Community College of Qatar, also our partners in the Commercial Bank of Qatar that supported this event and is making it happen. I would specifically like to thank the two co-organizers of the faculty members who really worked hard. Putting together collaborative effort of this type takes a lot of effort. It doesn't come naturally. And I should thank Dr. Mohammed Durrani and Dr. Rory Miller for all the work that they've done to put together this seminar and the seminars that will come. I am excited that you are joining us for this inaugural evening. We look forward to your participation in the months ahead. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Mohammed Naimi, President of the Community College of Qatar, to say a few words.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أما بعد، أصحاب السعادة الوزراء والشيوخ السفراء، سعادة الدكتور أحمد دلال، عميد جامعة جورجتاون في قطر، سعادة الدكتور ليوني لثبريدج، رئيس قطاع العمليات في مجموعة البنك التجاري، السيدات والسادة الخبراء والأكاديميين المتخصصين، الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يطيب لي أن أرحب بكم في حفل تدشين المجموعة البحثية المشتركة الأمن السيبراني التي تجمع بين كلية المجتمع وجامعة جورجتاون في قطر. ويسعدني ويشرفني أن أتواجد بينكم لحضور فعالية هذا اليوم لمناقشة إحدى القضايا الحيوية في مجال الأمن السيبراني، ألا وهي حماية الوطن من هجمات الإلكترونية، والتي تعد الأولى في سلسلة من الفعاليات التي تنظمها المجموعة البحثية في مجال الأمن السيبراني. إننا في كلية المجتمع نعتز بكوننا مؤسسة التعليم العالي الوطنية الوحيدة التي تمنح درجتي الدبلوم والبكالوريوس في مجال الأمن السيبراني وأمن الشبكات، وقد جاء تدشين الكلية لبرنامج الأمن السيبراني لتلبية حاجة سوق العمل القطري بمؤسساتها الحكومية والخاصة إلى مزيد من الكوادر الوطنية المؤهلة التي تتميز بمستوى متقدم من المعرفة والخبرة في هذا المجال، وقد بدأ البرنامج بالكلية في عام 2015 بقبول ما يقرب من 30 طالبا وطالبة، ثم نجح البرنامج في استقطاب المزيد من الطلاب حتى وصل إلى ما يزيد على 250 طالبا وطالبة. فالأمن السيبراني بلا شك واحدة الدعائم الأساسية لحماية البنية التحتية للمعلومات الحيوية الوطنية والتصدي للتحديات الإلكترونية المتزايدة والمتطورة في مجال أمن المعلومات والاتصالات، الأمر الذي من شأنه أن يدعم جهود دولة قطر الدؤوبة نحو بناء اقتصاد متنوع قائم على المعرفة. لذا سنسعى جاهدين من خلال عمل المجموعة البحثية المشتركة للأمن السيبراني إلى زيادة الوعي المجتمعي بتداعيات مخاطر الأمن السيبراني، وكذلك التوصل إلى حلول واقعية وقابلة للتنفيذ للعديد من القضايا التي قد تمثل تحديا لإنشاء بنية تحتية معلوماتية ذكية ومتطورة قادرة على تلبية احتياجات المجتمع وتحقيق التنمية المستدامة في الدولة. أتمنى أن تحققوا أقصى استفادة من الجلسة الحوارية التي تتضمنها فعالية اليوم لمناقشة التحديات المعاصرة التي تواجه الدول الصغيرة في مجال الأمن السيبراني. وأنا على يقين بأن الخبراء الذي تتشرف الجلسة باستضافتهم سيقدمون لنا الكثير من الحلول والأفكار التي ستثري معارفنا في هذا المجال. وفي الختام أود أن أتوجه بجزيل الشكر لجامعة جورجتاون على هذا التنظيم المتميز للحفل، ولمجموعة البنك التجاري لرعايتها الكريمة لهذه المدارة، وكذلك لجميع ضيوفنا الكرام. شكرا لحسن استماعكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Excellencies, Dean Dalal, President Naimi, distinguished audience. My name is Rory Miller. I'm a professor of government here at Georgetown and a co-convener of the initiative, the Cybersecurity Research Group, that is really responsible for organizing tonight's events. The other convener, or co-convener, is Dr. Mohammed Al-Durrani, Chair of Information Technology Department at Community College and Professor of Cybersecurity and Networks. And he will be up here shortly, but before that I'd just like to talk very briefly in the opportunity I have to discuss about this project a little. And first I would like to thank the Dean and the President for the support for this project from its outset, as well as the other colleagues in both of our institutions who've worked hard to make this happen tonight. And in their brief introductions, both the Dean and the President spoke and rightly noted of the importance of cybersecurity to Qatar and the opportunities that our cooperation offer in dealing with this issue. Now, Dr. Al-Durrani and his colleagues at the Community College are training a new generation of Qatari cyber engineers and cybersecurity experts to face up to the technical challenges of tomorrow and also the opportunities. Here in Georgetown, we teach our students some different skills. In particular, how to understand, adapt, and respond to rapidly changing and increasingly complex geostrategic security environment. And that's the environment we all inhabit and there is no escaping from. Almost 80 years ago, the famed physicist Albert Einstein remarked that the atomic bomb has changed everything except the way we think. We are now living in another era where technology has changed everything. And the nature of that technology, its accessibility, the ease with which it can be weaponized, not only by superpowers in a nuclear age, but by non-state groups, by individuals, by smaller sovereign actors, really anyone at all with a motive and a cause. For someone like me who works in regional and international security, that is the real challenge of the cyber revolution. And yet, to borrow a term quite widely used, too many of us are still cyber infants. We haven't changed our way of thinking. And what we really need to do is to not only reimagine the ways we need to act to meet these novel threats, but to do so before they occur, so that we can be ahead of them. And in these terms, I would like to say that when it comes to cyber, Dr. Al-Durrani and his colleagues at the Community College provide the know-how, and we here in Georgetown try to provide the know-why. We complement each other, and tonight's event is intended to launch formally our efforts to bring that collaboration to life. In the future, we hope to organize many more public talks like tonight's on equally topical and relevant issues. And I'm happy that Will Wilson is here to kick us off on this fascinating topic as the first of hopefully many more distinguished speakers. I'm also very grateful to Commercial Bank of Qatar for making it possible for him to do so by sponsoring tonight's event. And I look forward very shortly to hear the bank COO, Dr. Lethbridge, speak on some of the important issues that this wider topic raises. Apart from hosting public talks to large audiences, when we conceived this idea last year, the two of us, myself and Dr. Aldarani, the main other hope, if not the primary hope, was to establish a research group on cybersecurity that brings together Qatar-based engineers, scientists, political scientists, security studies experts, security practitioners, technologists, and other officials working in the cyber-related areas in the public sector, the private sector, the policy world. That was our goal. And we hope that this group will come together on a regular basis in a structured setting over the longer term, to think and talk in novel ways on key issues, key challenges, and key opportunities, to prioritize areas of focus relevant to Qatar in general, and the participating organizations and individuals in particular. To organize workshops and to initiate further research on key issues that have a practical and a policy as well as a scholarly impact. And I hope that going forward, some of you in the audience tonight will join us and become stakeholders in that ambitious venture as it evolved, as participants, as partners, as sponsors, as end users. But for now, I just hope that you enjoy the evening, and once again, I thank you all for coming. So thank you very much.
I'm not going to give a speech. I think Dr. Miller made the point on behalf of both of us, right? And thank you very much for coming, and I appreciate all. And I'm here to introduce a person that we are very honored to have, and I'd like to give an introduction to her before I ask her to come to the podium. We have here from Commercial Bank of Qatar, Dr. Leonie Lethbridge, and she is the Chief Operating Officer and Executive General Manager at Commercial Bank. She joined the bank in July 2017 from ANZ Royal Bank, the leading international bank Cambodia, where she served as Chief Executive Officer from 2016 to 2017. In her 15 years of experience at ANZ, Dr. Lethbridge served in senior roles across developed and emerging markets, including as a CEO, COO, and CRO. As a result, she brings deep transformation and innovation capability to her role as Commercial Bank. Prior to joining ANZ, Dr. Lethbridge was a managing consultant advising clients in the financial services, manufacturing, and telecommunications sectors. Her career also included executive roles in the manufacturing industry in Australia and Asia. Dr. Lethbridge's leadership experiences extend to board roles in a range of organizations. She served as director of the Australia-Indonesia Center and as a board director of ASCHAM in Shanghai. She also acted in numerous advisor positions for both government and private sector organizations. She is currently a member of the board directors of Alternatif Bank in Turkey. She holds a PhD from Swinburne University of Technology and a master's degree in applied science from RMIT University. I'm honored to welcome Dr. Lethbridge to come to the podium and give her remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, distinguished guests, it's an honor and a privilege to be here. It's also an honor and a privilege for Commercial Bank to be able to partner to enable this event tonight. It's a privilege for us and it's important for us because cybersecurity is key to everything that we do. It's key to everything that we do because the digitisation of banking to provide great banking services, convenient banking services for our clients is absolutely key. So that it's important to us as a bank, but we also believe it's important for Qatar. Why is that? Because as a bank, as a member of the financial sector, all banks are actually fundamental to the economic stability and the social stability and the economic development of the economies and the societies which they serve. And yet, banks are also increasingly subject to determined and increasingly sophisticated attack. Not only are they increasingly determined, increasingly sophisticated, but one might say also increasingly destructive. And that is nowhere more important than in a small state. Why? Because there is a concentration effect from the network within which we operate. We're very, very connected to each other. But that's not the only reason. It's also because we are seeing increasing concentration in the way that bad actors attack networks. So we're seeing an increasing concentration in what you might call island hopping. The intention of an island hop is not just to take out or to impact or to steal information from a single actor, a single entity. It's actually to penetrate, damage, and obtain benefit from an entire network, supply chains, systems, ecosystems. So in that context, the weakest link is actually the most important link. We are seeing this now. We're seeing across the financial sector globally 67% year-on-year increase in island hopping attacks. So we need to, as I said, be very, very important that the weakest link is actually the most important link that we should be thinking about. Secondly, we're mindful of our accountability within the financial services sector to be especially vigilant because the preponderance, the frequency of attacks is increasing substantially, exponentially in fact. In 2018, British banks had to report to their regulator a 1,000% increase in 1 year, a 1,000% increase in cyber attacks. So that's a frightening statistic. And it's not simply the financial institutions that are impacted, it's obviously all of us who use financial services, which means all of us. So, as I said, increasing sophistication, particularly this network effect, increasing preponderance and frequency of it, but also increasingly destructive. So around 1/3 of all attacks are attempting to gain a foothold by which they can A, strike back against the defending organisation, but B, cause damage to that organisation, 1/3 of them. That's even more frightening. So actually this is I think an existential threat is in some circles very common language at the moment, but really this can be an existential threat. So we recognise that as a financial institution and as a member of an important member of the Qatar community. So the question is, what do we think we should do about this? First of all, we think it's really important that we individually stay ahead of the game as individual institutions. But secondly, I think the Qatari response to the blockade is exemplary in terms of how we should respond. What was that response? It was teamwork. It was about information sharing. It was about coordination. We need that. We need to know, we need to understand what is happening at some other part of the supply chain and how it's going to impact us. So we have individual accountability, but we have collective accountability. As a bank, that's one of the reasons why we're very happy to be involved in this event this evening, because as they say, we hang together or we hang together. As a bank, we face a choice. We could go back to the Stone Age. We could rely on paper, but frankly, that's no better. Financial fraud has been a problem as long as there's been financial services. So we have no choice. We just need to be very good. What does that mean? It means we need to educate ourselves, we need to educate our customers, we need to educate each other, and we need to be constantly alert. So I'm actually very interested to hear our speaker tonight inform all of us, including myself and the commercial bank. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lethbridge. Appreciate your talk. And your comments are really valuable. It's very important. And I think the two things that probably organizations like yours should focus, and many of them should pay attention to, there are two things you need: resources, which are mainly huge investment in cybersecurity, but also manpower, which is the human resources. And that's where our colleges, provide, because when we, as our president said, the local markets need, and all the students we have are Qataris, and we need to graduate them and make them, at that level where when they enter the market, they know what they're doing. Now to our next speaker, the main speaker. I have the pleasure to introduce Will Wilson, and Will joined the British Royal Air Force, or British Air Force, in 1989. In his 23 years of Air Force career, he served in security roles across the world and worked at the highest level in UK defense intelligence. When he left the Air Force in 2011, he joined the Army Reserve as an intelligence officer, and at the same time set up his own defense and intelligence consultancy. He has 2 master's degrees in international relations and has published and lectured internationally on security and technology issues, including here in Qatar. In 2017, he joined a rapidly growing cybersecurity scale in Edinburgh as a consultant, before he was enticed last year to move to Qatar to work for CSRG as a lecturer at Ahmed bin Mohammed Military College. He lives in Doha with his wife, Mehari, that's right, I said that, who works in the British Embassy investment team, and he has 2 boys aged 2 and 5. My honor to welcome you to the podium and give your speech, please. Thank you.
Shukran, and hello, really honoured to be here. It's my absolute honour to be here, and thank you to all of you involved in getting me standing on this stage. It genuinely is an honour to be involved in this really exciting initiative at this great institution. I'm going to be talking about these points here this evening, and I'm going to stick. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a technical guy. I know enough, I hope, about technology. I'm really. I come from this from a strategic perspective, from an intelligence and international relations perspective, and so that's the way I'm going to talk about this today, if that's okay. So, moving on to we're talking about cybersecurity and small states and national security. There's a lot of debate about what a small state is. And much of that debate isn't particularly useful, because as we're deciding what it is, we're not actually working out what we're going to do about it. In preparation for this talk, I determined that I was going to talk about small states as states that struggle to sustain themselves organically across politics, demographics, economics, and security without help from the outside world. And I thought that they did that because of their lack of strategic depth. And what do I mean by strategic depth? In a physical sense, if we look at a country like Russia, it has a lot of physical security strategic depth. It's a big country with lots and lots of different types of resources. If it's invaded, as it was by Napoleon and Hitler, it has the room to maneuver and regroup and come back. So it has physical strategic depth, which many small states lack. In terms of demographic, some states that have very large populations are able to deal with strategic shocks very easily. So if that's war, if it's famine, if it's disease, or if it's the invention of a new economic sector like technology, they have the people that can man that sector and deal with that change. Political institutions like the presidency in America have been around for a long time, and they're underpinned by constitutions and philosophies and ideas, and despite numerous scandals over the years, they have the strategic depth to be able to endure. Many small states are much younger countries and therefore may not have that depth. The financial crisis of 2008, countries that lacked economic strategic depth struggled, like Greece and Iceland, whereas other countries with more strategic depth were able to survive that shock. And in terms of defence and security, small states generally have small populations, and so they're going to have small militaries. That guy could be the greatest swordsman in the world and the world has ever seen, and those cavalry guys could be the worst cavalry the world has ever seen. But I don't put much hope in the swordsman in that situation, because he hasn't got the strategic depth to deal with the problems that he faces. And that leads us to the kind of security challenges that small states face because they lack that strategic depth. And I've broken them down into three areas. The first one is political independence and territorial integrity. A small state is unlikely to be a big player in any of the global organisations, and therefore it's less likely to have influence in those big organisations. If it's got a small army and it's got a small landmass with which to manoeuvre it around, it's going to struggle if its territorial integrity is threatened to defend itself. Demographics, economics, and social sustainment. A small population generally means a narrow economic base, which is going to impact the ability to generate economic revenue, unless you get lots of people coming in to the small state to help you man your industries and grow your industries, in which case you have a multicultural society, and to attract and accommodate and retain that society, you may have to compromise your own society and your own values. So your ability to sustain your culture becomes impacted. And finally, many small states are in regions of the world where there's either too much water or there's not enough water, and there are a lot of environmental issues and extremes of weather. And so they actually face physical problems as well as all these. We'll talk about how they might balance those. So this is a simple four-box grid. On this side, we've got the ability to resist a strategic shock or a problem. Along the bottom, we've got the ability to recover from a strategic shock or a problem. High at this end, low here. If you have very strong resistance and you can recover quickly, you're pretty much invulnerable. If you're able to recover quickly but you're not able to resist for very long, you end up with short-term vulnerabilities. If you can resist for a long time, but once you are overcome, it's very difficult to recover. You have long-term vulnerabilities. If you have little of either, you're very highly vulnerable to strategic shock. And that looks a little bit like the kind of cybersecurity model, I think, as well as one for small states. Large states are able to be invulnerable because they can afford a lot of both. Most states have to make judgments as to where they do their investments. Many small states remain highly vulnerable in this bottom area because they haven't got the depth and the economics and the population to deal with those kind of issues. And as a result of that, small states tend to be heavily reliant on the international rules-based system for stability and order. Small states have thrived since the end of the Second World War, when the United Nations embraced them, organisations like NATO pulled them in, and norms around international relations and security meant that it was abnormal to invade other countries. And we've seen an extended period of peace since the end of the Second World War, the likes of which we haven't really seen before in international relations and history. The other thing they're reliant on is external actors for resources, be that labour, be that goods and services, be that for financial capital, or when it all goes wrong, aid to restore the situation that they now find themselves in. And I would argue that cyber is a little bit like that. Nobody owns, we were talking about this earlier, nobody owns the cyber world. Nobody owns the internet. There's no one state that's in charge, and therefore it is based on norms and agreements and partnerships and alliances. And the technologies come from lots of different countries. The workforce is global. So I think cyber and small states have quite a lot in common when you start to look at these variables. And so enough about small states, let's move on to cyber and small states. And I'm going to think about this and talk about this in the same order, the same three areas that I've just spoken about. And as we're going through, let's just think about this matrix and where small states sit in there and their vulnerabilities. Cyber offers much wider potential and often deniable opportunities for states to coerce and influence the behaviour of other states. We're seeing a lot of that at the moment. As was mentioned earlier, Qatar has experienced this prior to the blockade. Estonia, when it's tried to exert its independence from Russia and move more towards the EU, again was attacked. And as behaviour of states is tried to be coerced. Technologies like Facebook and YouTube have led to a diffusion of power in the information age. There are new actors with new voices and greater power than they've ever had before. So actors and billionaires and businessmen are now entering the political sphere in a way that they haven't done before. A politician will have to embrace different minority interest groups in a way that they haven't done before. So there we see Trump trying to attract black voters. At the same time, he's trying to attract white supremacists who probably believe that those black voters don't deserve the vote. And that's very challenging. And political subversion. So my country, the UK, is seeing a lot of this at the moment in terms of the Brexit vote and the information warfare campaign that's around that. It happened with America as well. What Mr. Putin doesn't want us to talk about is the fact that these type of political subversion is undermining the international rules-based system. And that's really important for a small state because that's what small states rely on for their security and have done since the end of the Second World War. Turning to demographics, economics and social sustainment. This map here shows that last year we were short. The cybersecurity skills gap was 3 million. We needed 3 million more cybersecurity experts in the world than we have. And there are some great efforts going on in Qatar to grow an organic capability so you're less dependent on the outside world. Of course, if you grow really, really good cybersecurity experts here in Qatar, they will become part of that global workforce, and the rest of the world will be trying to entice them from Qatar to their country, just as Qatar is trying to entice the best cybersecurity experts from Germany, for example. I see my friend from Ooredoo here. There could be some unintended consequences of joining the global cybersecurity market for a small state like Qatar. Cybercrime, as we've heard, the digital economy is absolutely enormous, and the way we use money now is digital. And therefore that has attracted criminals, because criminals are attracted to money. In 2014, one particular attack took $1 billion from 100 banks over 2 to 4 months. And as we heard earlier, if that kind of attention was turned on one small state, it could be catastrophic. And as well as political subversion, we have social subversion. In a multicultural society that you often find in a small state, it's easy to sow division. We can now, using technology, fabricate video and images quite easily, and it's getting more and more easy. Anybody seen The Lion King, the new version of The Lion King? Brilliant. Looks incredibly real. We can use those technologies to subvert a society. Social media is full of hatred and trolling and conspiracy theories and aggression. And when those two were combined in India in 2017 in what was known as the WhatsApp lynchings, rumours were spread that of child trafficking and human trafficking and trading in beef amongst Hindus, and a number of people were lynched, killed as a result. That, in a small state with a multicultural society, could be quite damaging, that type of behaviour. And finally, environmental security. So cyber physical attacks directed deliberately at Iranian nuclear capabilities, and indirectly through WannaCry at things like the British NHS, debilitated both. With small states operating in regions of the world where there are extreme weathers, and their critical national infrastructure is vital for the sustainment of business and life in that country, that kind of attack on a small state could be quite devastating. So that's all the bad news so far. So as we've heard earlier, these things can sound quite dystopian and problematic, but we'll move forward and we'll see if we can find some hope. I'm going to try to find some hope in two areas. The first area I'm going to talk about now is what I call traditional cybersecurity. And traditional and cyber aren't words that necessarily sit very well next to each other. But what I'm talking about is the protection of networks and the data on those networks. And then the other thing I want to talk about is information age threats, and these refer to what we actually do with those networks, which is generally exchange information. So as I say, by traditional cyber security, I mean threats to the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of networks and the data that are on those networks. And there are around 3 million attacks like that a day globally at the moment. And we might think of these as very technological things, but I like to think of these as very human things. We've got one actor trying to do something to another actor, and they will respond in a certain way to that act. And in that way, I believe this is very much part of general human competition, which is a fundamental part of human society. Now, for 30 years, I've been involved in the most extreme form of that human competition, which is warfare. And so I'd like to maybe dip into my experiences there and try to identify some similarities between warfare, politics, and cybersecurity. So as I say, as was mentioned, I was in the Air Force for a very long time, and my job was to defend. I was in the Air Force, but I was a soldier. My job was to defend air bases like that one in Kandahar. Modern military air bases are huge. They are complex adaptive systems with multiple actors completing multiple processes on lots of different types of systems, all for different purposes, and they all interact together in different ways. Kandahar had over 20,000 people working on it and living on it from 40 different nations, all operating different equipment for different reasons and to different rules. That's a complex adaptive system. It's also a very strategic asset. Air bases are very strategic assets, and so you send your best soldiers to attack those bases. And in the first part of my career, my expected enemy was the Russian Special Forces, the Spetsnaz. Thankfully, I never actually had to fight them. But towards the end of my career, my actual enemy were the best of the foreign fighters in Afghanistan and Iraq. Their top people were sent to attack air bases. So these are the best of the best, these guys. Whereas the guys on the air base are technicians, logistics people. They are cooks, they are pilots. They are not necessarily experienced soldiers. That guy is an RAF engineer, and he will do 1 day a year, or he used to do 1 day a year on his military skills training, learning how to fight the ground war, because his job is to support the air war. So we have amateurs defending themselves against professionals. But fortunately, there are some mitigations. So that's a picture of my old regiment. So we were specialists in defence. We worked from the perimeter outwards, trying to stop guys, keep guys away from these guys here, so that they didn't have to look after themselves, they could just look after the aircraft. We used a lot of technology, ground surveillance radars, thermal imagery, lots of technology to enable us to do that. But by 2006, when air bases in Iraq and Afghanistan were getting attacked 1, 2, 3 times a day, I was in a rocket attack, don't tell my wife, where we received 80 rockets in 1 hour. It became very clear that one day a year training this guy just wasn't enough. And I was given the task of completely reinventing the training for the whole Air Force and to do it now. That cost a lot of money, it took a lot of resources, it took a lot of time, it distracted these guys from their real job, which was to get aircraft in the air. And it also demanded a massive cultural change in the Air Force that were focused on the air war, not necessarily on protecting themselves on the ground. So that's how great I am. The reason I'm telling you about that is because I see a lot of similarities in the cyber world. So the cyber world is a large, complex, adaptive system with lots and lots of different people doing lots of different things on it, using lots and lots of different devices, all to different standards and laws and the like. The people who are trying to subvert the internet are deep experts in cyber, whereas the people using the internet and networks are normal people who don't necessarily understand how their computer or their telephone works at all. And in the workplace probably get an hour's training a year, and that hour's training is a tick box exercise and somebody's put the answers on the wall so it doesn't distract you too long from your work. So we have poorly trained amateurs trying to defend themselves against experienced professionals. There are some experts in this system to help protect those users, but we've already heard we're very, very short of those. And so that puts an over-reliance, I would suggest, on the technology, because we don't have enough experts, not a lot of people know what they're doing, so we're going to rely on the technology, and we keep cyber in the technical world, and we forget that it's about humans competing with each other. But technology will only get you so far in human competition. You can have the best technology in the world. You can have the best of everything. And those guys are completely matched. They have the same bike, they have the same 3D printed handlebars, they're wearing the same suits, they've had the same training, the same dietary attention and care, but one of them is going to win. And one of them is going to lose. So it's not necessarily all about the technology. In fact, it certainly isn't all about the technology. A lot of it's going to be about the training. Okay, so moving on from the kind of traditional cybersecurity, thinking about how we protect networks, I'd now like to talk a little bit about information age threats, if I may, and I'll just catch up with my notes. Yeah, so here I want to talk about what we actually do with the network, which is basically exchange information. That's what we do with technology. Here we can see deep fake technologies, where it's now very easy to fabricate video and very easy to fabricate images. If this lady in the corner looks familiar to you, it's because she has been designed by an algorithm to look familiar to you. And she's been designed by an algorithm to look attractive to middle-aged men. And thousands of middle-aged men received LinkedIn requests from this lady in a phishing scandal about 2 years ago. And thousands of people accepted her. If you need to check your LinkedIn contacts now and change your passwords, I won't be offended if you pull your phones out. We've already spoken about political subversion and the role that data analytics plays in that. We are pumping data about ourselves into the system all the time, and politicians and political movements and nefarious actors are hoovering that up so that they can change our behaviour. And guys like these guys at the bottom are able to reach out to other people in different ways that they haven't necessarily been able to reach out previously. And these are able to have a much louder voice than they do than they have done previously. I think that the vast majority of Muslims don't think that the way to run a society is burning people alive and enslaving children and women and inflicting torture on people, just as I believe that the vast majority of Westerners don't believe that Muslims are such a threat we should be bursting into mosques with machine guns and killing old men and children. But if you look at the internet and you look at our media, you might think that was the case. And people use that to change behaviours and sow division. And so for me, that puts all of this stuff firmly in the role of war and politics, somewhere where, again, I'm quite comfortable, so I'll leap back into my past if that's okay. The arrow points to the Falkland Islands, which is a small British protectorate off Argentina in the South Atlantic. Beautiful place, lots and lots of penguins, and a very, very lovely place, but not much else there. In 1982, Argentina, who claimed the islands, invaded and took the 30 or so British guys that are there prisoner. Britain then sent a task force down to recapture the islands. There was a bit of a nasty war, big losses on both sides. That's an Argentinian ship, that's a British ship. But Britain won that war and has maintained quite a significant military presence in the Falkland Islands ever since. I was sent down there in 2012 to set up an information warfare capability. Politics between Argentina and Britain were not going great, and we thought we needed to get more message out there. We ran an exercise, and I like to put this was an exercise. It was a war game, some training. It didn't happen. In the scenario, Argentina sent special forces to the island in a deniable way, in the way that Russia sent guys to Ukraine a few years ago, and they claimed they weren't their guys. They were just patriotic Argentinians doing what they do. We had top secret information in the exercise that suggested that was not true, and they were actually Argentinian soldiers. So I designed an exercise that had a really expensive, very, very expensive ship tracking submarines and aircraft and fast boats. I deployed some snipers to conduct surveillance using helicopters and lots of other expensive equipment. And finally, we got a very, very expensive Typhoon, like the ones you've just bought, to fly over the rendezvous, take some imagery of the handoff that proved that this was an Argentinian operation in the exercise. The pilot delivered the CD to me that contained a very, very large data file, and if I got that back to the UK, the war was over. We could get it on the television, we could convince the UN that it was the Argentinians and not us. But on the Falkland Islands, we did not have a data link that allowed me to send any of that imagery back to the UK. So I couldn't stop the war. Unless I went to the local radio station, which is run by a charity that provides TV and radio for deployed British soldiers, and they could have sent it to me. So I could have sent this top secret piece of information that's going to stop a war using the local radio station. So I've been socially engineered for data loss of top secret information. So I think that's, why do I tell this story? I think it shows the importance of information. I think it shows the importance of having the capabilities to be able to move that information around. So the bandwidth that I really needed in the Falklands so I could tell the world the truth about what was going on that exercise is being currently used by people who are trying to undermine the international rules-based system by doing exactly the opposite, spreading lies, spreading conspiracies and rumour around the internet. So they've looked at the internet and the current system, and they've seen the access that it gives all of us to facts, to experts, to information and opinions, and they've decided to subvert that. And that's a really, and they've turned propaganda into fake news. And that's a really, really big issue if you are a small state that relies completely on the international rules-based system for your security and your prosperity and your well-being and stability in the world. So now it's almost impossible for us to counter lies and inaccuracies on the sides of big red buses. When we start to see our leaders and our governments and our people saying uncharacteristic things and doing potentially unspeakable things, and we see that our capabilities, our brand new aircraft are crashing or they're being used for conspiracies, all faked using modern technology, That's going to cause us significant problems in those of us who support the international rules-based system. That's going to cause us some problems. That sounds quite dystopian, and I think that sounds quite inevitable, and it sounds like really bad, sensational news, as we were talking about earlier. But this is human competition, and that's their move, and now it's the turn of normal, sensible people to play their turn in this competition. So I am hopeful that this is not the end state, this is just the current state of competition as we see it at the moment. In my last couple of minutes, what I'd like to do now is just bring that back to Qatar and talk about a few so whats for Qatar from my perspective. And as Dr. Mohammed and Dr. Rory have said, I think this event hopefully will become more than just an event. It will become activity, a group that meets regularly. And maybe the points I'm going to make might form good workshops if anybody in the room would be interested in doing that as we go forward. So the first point I want to make is about the war for talent. And so this talks to where are you getting your cyber expertise from. You're competing globally for cybersecurity skills. And Dr. Mohammed told me a story the other week about a cybersecurity expert being offered $4,000 a day for a 90-day contract, and only for them to turn that down a couple of days before they were due to come because they had a better offer. Now that's a lot of money, and so money might not be the way that we're going to win this war for talent. It's going to be something else. What is it that's going to win the war for talent in the cyber world when cybersecurity experts are so in demand? I think it's probably going to be something like innovation and freedom and status. From my perspective, why am I in Qatar? I get a bit more money than I would do if I was working in the UK. That is true. But the thing that really attracted me to this country and this city is how exciting it is. And I tend to feel like, I imagine people felt like in New York in the late 1800s. People came from all over the world to build a really exciting global thing, New York. And I think that's what's happening here. And how can we get that kind of excitement into the cyber world and make this a place where innovative cyber people can come and show how good they are. The other thing I'll talk about is maybe the war for talent at home, which is you're trying to attract the best people into the cybersecurity world in Qatar, the best and the brightest young Qataris, some of whom are in the room, to come and join the cybersecurity enterprise. Well, defence is also trying to attract the brightest and best young Qataris into its organisation. Oil and gas are trying to attract the best and brightest young Qataris into its organisation. Finance, manufacturing, foreign affairs, government. Now, I guess there are only so many bright and best Qatari young people out there. So there is a danger that sectors within Qatar start competing with each other and start to undermine each other. So I guess the point from my first point is there a strategy? What's the big plan? We've got the 2030 knowledge sharing vision. But who's actually going to do what, how, and where to who, and what are the priorities, and how does it work? Where are we going to put the best and brightest Qataris, and where does immigration come into this? Money, time, resources, and cultures. So to reinvent military training for the Royal Air Force cost a lot of all those things, and the hardest bit when I did that project, changing the mindset of 23,000 people, was the hardest thing that I did when we did that project. I didn't do it by myself, clearly I had a lot of help. And getting the population and the workforce ready to fight this information war and this cyber war is also going to take a lot of time, resources, money, and it's going to require a cultural change. And it's going to have costs as well in terms of every hour that you spend teaching a non-cyber specialist cyber skills is detracting them from what they're actually being paid to do or what they want to do in their home. So again, what's the plan? What's the strategy? Who's actually going to do what, when, and how to who? And I know there are plans and I know there are strategies. Are they all joined up? Putting the international rules-based system on life support. People are attacking the international rules-based system all over the world at the moment. Big countries with strategic depth like mine and America are struggling and suffering. If you are although they are starting to push back, reading the papers this week. But if you're a small state that like Qatar, and you are a big player in the international rules-based system, I look at what the Emir was doing in Europe and America last week, it's clear that Qatar is an important part of the international rules-based system, and it's certainly punching above its weight and doing a great job. But as other people are trying to attack the international rules-based system, it's beholden on small states like Qatar to do everything that they can to try to prop up and support this international rules-based system, I think. And that's not very cybery, but I think it has a massive impact on cybersecurity and national security. And then my last point is the information warfare and real and present dangers. So Qatar's brand is exceptional. I talk all the time. I run information warfare classes at the military college, and I talk all the time about how well Qatar has done in the information warfare space. And you've not only survived, but you've thrived under blockade. And I think that's great. The question will be, how long would that endure if a malign actor turned its full information warfare capabilities on Qatar in the way that they turned their full information warfare capabilities on the Brexit vote, the election in America a couple of years ago. To fight that kind of information warfare takes an entire nation to be joined up and to be completely aligned, from government, business, individuals, everybody. And that's really, really difficult. Although I think the fact, if I look at Qatar's government system, if I look at the kind of emergent nature of the socio-economic sector here and how it works, I think there's an opportunity. You don't quite have a blank canvas, but you have, I think, all the conditions to come up with a really joined up and clever way to continue your success in that information warfare fight. As I say, I think these would be wonderful discussions to take forward if anybody was interested. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a great honour to speak to you. I'm delighted that I was asked. Thank you very much.
I want to pose a question to you related to the ethics issues, and you promised that you will touch it, especially information warfare. It's a very interesting area, you know, we need to be, and this is what the coherent strategy should be based on that one. Because, for example, if you don't have ethical practices, it's a very dangerous watershed. Yeah. And then the other one, Miss Manning, about whistleblower. That one, the issues also we need to address what happened, you know. I'm looking forward about, especially now, the fate of Snowden, poor guy, you know, other than Julie. I think she's raising the issues. We need to be, you know, institutionalize that one and the protection for whistleblower, because you cannot have rule-based without some protection to privacy, giving transparency and forthcoming, you know, a vibrant democratic practices. I'm looking forward to ethics and protection of whistleblowers.
Yeah, Shukran, I think it's a very, very insightful point. So it reminds me, a couple of years ago I did some research into military deception. Deception, of course, potentially being a very unethical thing to do. And the question we were posed by the British military was, how do we get better at deception? Because Russia and China and Daesh and Al-Qaeda and all of these people are pretty good at it. And the British government wanted to get better at it. And whilst much of it was classified, I think the headline findings that I had was, if you want to be a democracy, and or you want to be part of the international rules-based system, it's really difficult to do deception, because being a democracy and being part of the international rules-based system means that you have to play by the rules. And so I think it's a really interesting point. I was a proper consultant. I didn't give a full answer. I just gave them another problem so that they might give me some more work to consider. But I think it's a really knotty problem. How do you as an important member in Qatar or the UK of the international rules-based system be deceptive and to fight deception? Particularly when we start to look at deepfake technologies and things like that. And I think it's going to come down to people, processes and technology. We need the technologies that are able to identify quickly deepfakes and fake information. And we need to be able to then have the processes in place to be able to issue a rebuttal and an effective rebuttal very quickly. And the people that are involved in both those processes need to be trained to how to identify this type of stuff. When it comes to whistleblowers, whistleblowers I think are a really important part of the international rules-based system because they are part of the system that keeps players in that rule-based system playing by the rules. And there are a lot of laws protecting whistleblowers, but we can see in the States at the moment those laws trying to be undermined. So, and I think that when I made the passing comment that I can see the world slightly pushing back at the moment, and in the way my Prime Minister is being confronted, the way President Trump is being confronted, the way the Italian Premier is being confronted. Perhaps this is the start of the international rules-based system pushing back and going, okay, that's enough. I really hope. I don't know if that answers your question, sir.
Go ahead, just the gentleman there in the middle.
My name is Mohammed Abouish. I'm a cybersecurity enthusiast. I work in the field of oil and gas. My question is, I have two questions basically. The first question is, how do the cybersecurity measures that you put in operation technologies, would you put it the same in the general cybersecurity? You should have a differentiation, I think. And my second question is about the talent. How do you trust your talent? And how do you trust they're working to the best of your interest and of their own interest? Thank you.
Dr. Alderani?
So, thank you. Let me get the first question right. You're talking about the general cybersecurity and more specialized, right? Yes. Well, and I'll get back to the second one. When you speak about the general cybersecurity, you can take an introduction in cybersecurity course, that's fine, okay? But then what you learned, either in a training course or even if you go on YouTube and try to do home study or you go to university, you come out with the general knowledge. But then that does not qualify you to be a specialist. The difference is that when you go into the field, you are hit with various technologies, either hardware, software, applications, and all that, that unless you are ready and you have a technical background, you will not be able to, So it requires long number of hours in terms of training and education and attending seminars and home studies and all that. I'll give you an example. Hackers, for example. You can be a hacker without going to college. If you are smart enough and you are hardworking enough. There was a case in the United States that a neighbor didn't like his neighbor. And he wanted to invade his privacy. So his Wi-Fi accessible because you are close by, like if you're living in an apartment or you're in a coffee shop in Starbucks and you're in a building, you get all the links from different Wi-Fis, right? And the access points provide you that. So in order to revenge, what he did, he took 4 books on Wi-Fi networking and how to hack into another Wi-Fi. And he did that, he managed to get the password. He posted all the porno stuff and all the bad letters and sent to all his friends. Finally, he got caught. He made one stupid mistake, which is he hacked from his own home.
which the FBI at the end of the day found out the address of the machine and the IP address, the internet protocol address, and he got caught, went to jail. But the victim couldn't defend himself, because when you take somebody else's identity, you are basically, you're taking the other person, sending everything in his name or her name. So that's where the difference between really specialized and general. Now, the second question, what is it? Sorry, it was a long answer for the first one.
If we buy in our cyber skills, how can we trust the people that we've brought in?
Trusting people. Now, that's a very tough one, really, especially in a multicultural society where I'm sure that not only in the bank, but in various organizations, you have different nationalities are there. And they are probably, have different skills also. But the problem is that how you can secure it. Most of the hacking or the cyber attacks can be from inside. We call it inside job. Somebody got fired and is upset and he has an access to the network and he will leave a virus and get on the plane and go, and very difficult to find him and bring him back. So yes, it is a problem, and that's where I think background checks, signing agreement, making sure that there is a time lag before his firing and his departure, making sure that you have done your due diligence. If you work in a sensitive environment like military or intelligence, there is a deep kind of check on your background. Make sure that's where I think when you are in Qatar, for example, we need to get Qataris there, because Qatar is at the end of the day, where they're going to go. This is their country. They have to protect their country. Their loyalty is different. Some of the bad actor, not all of them, I'm not talking about all of them, that might have hidden agenda. Who knows? So yes, it is a big issue. The trust might be a big problem.
Okay, we have two questions at the front now. First yourself, and then Your Excellency. Go ahead.
Yes, question to Mr. Russell. During the blockade, a lot of trolls try to affect and drive people's behavior and opinion here in Qatar, but maybe because of a small country, we managed to actually overcome it. Do you think that this is a rule that applies to everywhere where it's a small country? It's going to be harder to drive these kind of behavior and opinion, like what happened, obviously, with the election 2016 and the UK Brexit. And number two, and I want to ask you this honest opinion, if you were in the other side when I talk about the blockade, and that initiative or that approach has failed, what would be your next move?
Yeah, okay. Shukran, thank you. I think, in answer to your first question, I think I nearly included a slide on this in my presentation, which was there are advantages to being a small state when it comes to cyber, because your attack surface is much smaller. So fewer devices, fewer institutions, your attack surface is much lighter. So actually your ability to resist is potentially higher. So you end up being in that kind of top left quadrant in that 4-box grid perhaps. But of course once you are overcome, you don't have the depth in a small state to recover. So I think it's a really interesting, so that's the kind of technical aspect of it. Your question was a bit more about the kind of information warfare, and I think what's happened here is leadership. And you see very clear leadership, and you listen to the Emir's speech at the opening of the National Museum, for example, and the way that he's said, don't gloat. If you're from the UAE, you can still own a business here, because we were friends for a long time, we were family for a long time, and hopefully we will be again at some point. And so I think without good leadership, trolling and that social subversion is allowed to take hold. And I think if I look at the West, if I look at my country, we haven't had we've had a pretty poor run of prime ministers, perhaps. Please don't quote me on that, anyone. I will need to go home at some point. You know, but maybe leadership in the West is not, you know, we haven't seen a Churchill for a while. So I think leadership is probably the one-word answer to your first question. What would I do in the if I was the other foot? Well, I don't know. I'd probably back down. I'd probably know when I was beat, and I'd probably look at bigger problems. You know, there are bigger problems in the region that perhaps need to be addressed, and doing those together is probably the way ahead. You know, and you know, colleagues of mine and students of mine from the college were in Saudi taking part in the Gulf Shield exercise earlier in the year. You know, so there is still some cooperation going on. But yeah, I guess I'd hopefully know when I was beat, and I'd look at the big picture. That's what I'd do.
My name is Mohammed Al-Sada, former Minister of Energy and Industry. As you know, the whole world, including Qatar, my country, is building capacities as far as cybersecurity is concerned, training people, educating them, etc. Now, this is a question now. A good cyber security specialist have the tools, if you like, to be otherwise. Security companies worldwide tend to be vicious mercenaries. Good engineers are good reverse engineers as well. How can you make sure that those highly trained people fulfill their objectives and not defeat their objective by some of them, if you like, or fraction of a percentage counteract the objective, and you end up with, if you like, highly trained cyber security, if you like, specialists against cybersecurity, hackers and alike. So you may end up spending money and defeating your purpose because you end up with those who will work against the objective.
Why don't you go, Will, and then Dr. Mohammed, if you'd like to comment. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and it's a common problem in all forms of warfare and competition. I think that there's an old English phrase of a gamekeeper turned poacher. So the person who used to look after the livestock is now the person who sneaks in at night to steal the livestock because he knows the best way in and out. And so this kind of talks to that phenomenon. And I think two things. Firstly, there's currently an asymmetry. There's an imbalance, which in warfare is never good, because we're pitting one thing against something that's not quite the same, and the malign actors have the advantage at the moment. So we've got to bring some kind of symmetry up, but that, as you point out, brings risks with it, because a good hacker, and as you said, Dr. Mohammed, a good hacker is a good defender. So I think it's going to be a mixture of, you've got to grow that capability, and it's going to be all the types of things that Dr. Al-Zarani spoke about in terms of background checks, making checks on your people, and then technical processes like effective identity and access management controls, so that people can only get into the places where they should be getting into. Effective database management, so you know where all your assets are at all the time, and you're able to monitor those assets effectively in real time, which many SOCs can do at the moment. And then, with my intelligence head on, the bit that I always like to see is getting left of the bang, getting ahead of the game. So not just identifying when things are going wrong, but developing technologies that allow to alert you before things go wrong by identifying patterns of behaviour. So I think it's a real risk. It's managed, I think, by human processes, such as vetting, and as Dr. Al-Zarani mentioned. It's also there are technology fixes to this. And as we move forward, there will be better technology fixes to this. But of course, as those fixes go in place, it's human competition. So those systems will try to be circumvented. So I think we're always going to be potentially one step behind. It's how quickly you can adjust your position, how quickly you can observe what's going on, or reorientate yourself, decide and then act. That's got to be a lot quicker. And both people, processes and technology have a part to play in that as a team.
Dr. Mohammed, would you like to comment?
Yeah. I think cybersecurity specialists, when they get to that level of being on demand in the market, they already acquired the skills. They acquired the skills to do real damage. I'll give you a real-life example. I mean, discovered just this year, I think. Dark Matter in Abu Dhabi is a company that specializes for the government to recruit the best in the world in terms of cybersecurity specialists, and they use them to monitor and hack into their citizens and residents and visitors and even neighbors. The Washington Post and the New York Times reported that the Dark Matter hired the best of the best cybersecurity from NSA, National Security Agency. And it came out in the newspaper because those skills were used by a government on their own citizen. So yes, they go for the higher pay. So if they are ethically, as you know, always my childhood friend, Dr. Bashir, we talk about that. Ethically, they should not do that because they can't do that in the state. There are laws, although they do it sometimes, but there are certain laws if they're discovered. But for them, it's no rules, you know. They work for a foreign government, they get paid. However, when they go back home, they get questioned. So I agree with you. I mean, it's a difficult situation. You know, if you have good skills and you can sell it, and you don't have ethical, position on that, you can work for bad actors and you can do damage around the world.
My name is Mohammed Sir Al-Khatim. I'm an alumni from Georgetown SFSQ, currently working for Al-Fardan Group and a cybersecurity enthusiast. So my question is as follows. You mentioned a very critical point, which is that it takes lots of time and effort to train a cybersecurity expert, and then that there are lack of these experts in institutions, whether it be government or private sector. And in order to combat cybersecurity threats, a small state or a nation needs to band its institutions together in order to combat misinformation or such attempts like what we saw with the Cambridge Analytica scandal. So then my question is kind of like a chicken and egg scenario. How do you create or how do you foster institutions that train cybersecurity experts while also making sure they get filtered into the right institutions? Or would you then rather create laws or create a business culture for these private sectors to have cybersecurity positions or best practices first? You know, which comes first? Do you wait for the experts to reach a critical mass, or do you approach the private and public sector, or do you do both?
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. Dr. Mohammed?
Yeah, I just have a short answer for this. If you remember, and this has been in international news first, but then came out in locally, one of the major banks here was hacked. You probably know. I don't want to mention names. Now, this bank, when it was hacked, it was, I don't know if it was a ransomware, but anyhow, with it, 1.4 gigabyte, that represents 400,000 accounts with every profile you can think of, your PIN number, your passwords, your picture even, your transactions, everything is there, and it's been posted on World Wide Web, on the internet. Now, the issue here is that what did the bank do? Okay, they were resilient, they managed to do that, and just forget about it. It's done, and they can do their internal sweeping and cleaning. Central bank reacted quickly, and because it is more of your private data, I mean, you are a customer,
How is your private information is being published on the internet? They issued a circular or kind of a bylaw for all the banks to create, I'm sure Dr. Lethbridge, you can concur to that, to create a position where this position, a cybersecurity position, with the full team to oversee the whole operation of the bank and report to the CEO or COO. There will be a fine of 5 million real for every individual if that individual's private data or private information went out in the public. You know how difficult to do that? It's not an easy thing to protect. So that's an example to show you that it's such a difficult situation, and I'm sure not only the banks, but many institutions you have, they are struggling of how to keep your private data, your assets, your operation, your continuous, because if you lose, so imagine, for example, Qatar Airways reservation system goes down for 1 hour. How much money is there? They cannot afford to do that. So another issue here is that for a small state, I did a lot of research. I wrote 2 books so far, and in every book I looked at different models, the big state, small state. I noticed that small state don't care about that. The bigger the state is, they will create what's called national firewall. China, which is one of the biggest country in the world in terms of population and also I think size, I'm not sure about the size, but population, they have a national firewall as a country. Nothing goes in and goes out without going through that national firewall. In small state, you don't have that. So we are open to the internet. We are open to everything coming to us. I'm sure that the ISPs, which is the internet provider, do have a semi kind of their government, a firewall that can protect things coming and filter it, out, but cannot stop it. And if you are having 1,000, 2,000 government internet services and websites open, not only to local but to outside, you are open to. So if you look at the Chinese model, China, you don't have a Twitter there, you don't have Facebook, you don't have YouTube. They have their own. Why? Because that's where they trust. They don't trust the foreign application and because they know something is wrong with that. But again, it doesn't mean 100%. Would small states do the same thing as even United States? They created Homeland Security. And one of the things they did they did the national firewall for their main infrastructures. The power grids, the nuclear plants, everything that there is a national firewall. But they can't control everything because, these infrastructure are run by commercial companies. And the commercial companies, they do their own things. So small state, unfortunately, also they do this. And they are much more vulnerable to cyber attack. Estonia is a big case. I mean, if you research Estonia, you see what happened. Everything is stopped. The financial system stopped. People couldn't go to the ATM machine and get their money to that point. So yes, I hope, did I answer part of your question?
Yeah, sorry, I can't see you, Mohammed. It's a really interesting question. It makes me think of a piece of research I did for MOD a couple of years ago, which was looking at organisation and organisational structures and cybersecurity. And if we've got a lot of users who don't really know how their computer or their phone works and don't really care, we've got a very few cybersecurity people, and we're trying to train these and grow more of those and mix them in together, and we've got a lot of technology plugging the gaps. My observation was that a lot of organisations, just as we did in the Falkland Islands, socially engineer ourselves to be susceptible to cyber attack because we have a lack of experts. We dial up the security too much in the technical sphere, which makes the non-technical user annoyed and thinks, well, I'm just going to bypass that. I'll plug something in hotmail it to myself rather than use the bank's secure system or whatever. So I think organisations, when they're battling the problem that you've articulated, can socially engineer themselves to be in a worse position. And I guess, so from an organisational development perspective, I think what you've got to try to do the opposite, which is socially engineer yourself to be better at cyber security, regardless of what capabilities you've got within your organisation. And I think the instinct, and it's China's instinct, you know, is to batten down the hatches and make things very difficult for people coming in. But that also makes it very difficult for the people who are already in. And then that, in the Chinese example, throws up political problems, activists, and in the workplace it throws up people bypassing systems and processes. So I think the answer to the problem in the short term looks at the way we structure our organisations, the policies and the processes we put them in place. Are those policies and processes things that people actually want to and can use? And if they aren't, you know that those people are going to circumvent them, and so you need to do, and that you know you're going to be vulnerable. So,
all right, thank you. I think we need to wrap it up there. Just a few points. First,
Dr. Miller, sorry.
Sure.
You've been holding them up.
Okay, please, very quickly.
Hi, my name is Saad Al-Khatar. I'm a student in cybersecurity and networking in CCQ. So my question is for all of you. How do you think that, based on our technology that we are facing every day something new, so how do you think in organizational level, three things. First of all, the competition that's going on between the organizations, because you cannot make each organization follow the same rule to come to protect the country itself because of competition. Second, how do you think that the insiders, how can we protect ourselves from insiders? And the third thing is the law and standards. Do you think that Qatar actually has strongest law and standards to protect themselves for future attacks or no? Thank you.
You can answer that, Dr. Durrani.
Yeah, thank you. Suad was one of my students, and probably she's graduating, I think, with a bachelor degree. So this semester? Next semester, yes. I'll take your last question because I think what you mean about, you know, the laws and the regulation, because the regulation for each country might be, although they get together internationally, they attend same, United Nations, European Council, all that, and they agree on how to protect and regulate and stop, bad actors to hack. They have all these regulation and standard, and they have also recommendations to follow. The problem is that when you take that and you go back as a government entity and you try to implement them, then you are faced with other issues. So there are cultural issues. There are cultural within the organization. Do they follow that? For example, is there a change of password every 3 months? A policy on that. The regulation says you have to do that, for example. Or do you do a patching or a backup system or hardening your system? All these things, when it comes to technology, they don't follow. And this is where the issue is. So you can have all the regulation and you can have all the standards and you can do that, and they are there to follow, but would you do that? So to answer your question, they are not unified, Everyone is kind of partially, 90%, 50%, depends on that. The inside job is, I just mentioned that before, it's really difficult to pinpoint because you have so many, you can be local also do an inside job and damage. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that has to be from outside or some expat or some foreigners, no. But how you do that, it's a policy where fitting is one thing, background checks, knowing the person very well. Sometimes, they do put security cameras and even record the conversation. When you consider the data center is like the operational room of warfare. Everything is recorded, everything is monitored. So in a way, because there was a case actually in court, Ken, is that it was Asian, and this person works for a government entity, but he comes in at night, and he comes in between very bad hours, when everybody going home, 9 to 10 or something. He has a pass to get in. And while he was doing that on a frequent basis, he was monitored, he was recorded. They found out he was downloaded sensitive, critical, classified information and taking it out. It was an inside job. When they found out, who did that? So they went to the log and everything. What helped them is that they looked at the cameras and they saw the people going in and out. So many of those, non-technical things can come into the picture to make sure that the people you have inside are trusted. I wouldn't say completely monitored, but if you work in a sensitive areas, your phone might be even listened to. You have to do these things.
Okay, final thoughts, Will?
Yeah, and I think thank you for your question. I'll address the first part of it, if I may. How do we keep pace with the change? And how do we think about what change is coming next? So from my experience in the intelligence world, trying to predict the future is impossible. Nobody can say what's going to happen next. The real trick is to be as less wrong as possible so that you can adapt quickly when you find out what the truth actually is in the future. And I think the way that we used to do that in the intelligence world and the military world is that we would teach people how to think, not what to think. If you look at specific technologies and you tell people how to address those technologies, 24 hours later, that information is out of date because something else has happened. And I think the cyber world is really particularly difficult. In the military world, overnight and covertly, you cannot invent a tank that is 1,000 times better than the tank that you had today. But in the cyber world, overnight, you can invent a virus or something that is 1,000 times better than it was yesterday, and you can do it in secret. So predicting that type of thing is impossible, but giving people the mindset and the tools to be able to cope with that rapid change and making decisions in a rapidly changing environment, that you can do.
Okay. Well, look, we'll call it an end with that optimistic note. I'd just like to thank our panelists, Dr. Alderani, Will Wilson, Dr. Lethbridge for speaking, our co-hosts from the Community College and Georgetown, and all of you for coming. I very much hope, and I think you do too, that this is only the beginning of this journey, and we hope that many of you will come and take it with us. And with that, I'd just say there's a reception outside where we can continue our conversation.